And so today, again, is the first session of this two-part series on autism strategies. I'll now hand it over to our presenter, Shawn Bryant, who's been our longtime presenter, partner, and trainer, who brings in about 30 years of early childhood experience. Welcome, Shawn. We're so happy to have you here today. Thanks for birthday.
All right. Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Leah, and welcome, everyone. Happy New Year. Happy New Year to everyone. Welcome to 2025. This is my first training here with First 5 Alameda County in this year for the training department at First 5. So I'm really excited and really happy to be here. Thank you all for showing up. We had 163 people register for this training. That's a lot of folk. And right now, it looks like every time I look up the number, it keeps jumping. We have about 69 present. I'm sure there'll be more who will join us. Catherine told me to slow down because she knows I like to pack it in. So before you all got here, we were on the call before you, and she said, Shawn, we're going to give them a little break because she knows I'm notorious for not giving breaks. I just squeeze as much as I can get into those 2 hours. And she said, well, remember, it's today and Thursday. You know, she gets real gentle like my grandmother used to, and she wants you to really listen. And I said, Catherine, spot on. So we will give you all a little break, but there's a lot of information today and a lot on Thursday. And we'll jump right in. So welcome, welcome, welcome. See, look, it's 78 people here now to strategies for autistic children. So before we begin, I want to talk to you about this language because we've gone back and forth around me training myself to say children on the autism spectrum. And then what began to happen is human beings who we said were on the autism spectrum said, I never told you to identify me that way. So now we have people who can speak for themselves who say, I am autistic, identify me as autistic. So we're pivoting back. So you will hear me throughout the presentation use both. I'm trying to use the term now, more autistic children, even though I have been trained and that had been beat out of me to not use that term. But people who have been identified are saying that is their preferred term. So you will hear me pivot back and forth in my attempt to be responsive. So if you are the word police, I choose not to hear it. I'm just going to call the thing out. Save it for someone else. Talk about me later. Don't put it in the chat. Don't unmute and say that thing. And for those who just read some autism report last week they did it on 20 people. Great for you, but that's not what we're covering today. This isn't that kind of medical presentation. So I just need to call that out because there's always one every single time. It's not none of you, but it's that person that's not here yet. And they're going to join us and want to unmute and talk about the report that they read, some obscure report. All right, so I called that out because I believe in calling a thing a thing. Let's jump in. So I want to call your attention to First 5 Alameda County's YouTube page if you haven't been there. So May of 2022, we did a autism strategies for supporting young children, which I think is a great place to start. In addition to this, so if you haven't, I just put the link in the chat. I want to encourage you maybe sometime this week to go look at that because I consider this kind of the deeper dive into that, meaning it's not the same thing. We've added to it, but I think for those who came for strategies, there's some great, great, great strategies there. And today and on Thursday, we'll be adding more to what's already there. So I want to encourage you all to save that link, to go to it, and to check out the Autism Strategies recording from May of 2022. In addition, while you're there, check out the executive function strategies that First 5 sponsored and I facilitated. While you're there, there was a 4-part series at the beginning of COVID that we really took a lot of time and did. We called it Playing, Responding to Children Experiencing Stress, Strategies for Adults. It's 4 sessions. I think they're wonderful. They're all on YouTube. Go and check them out. We also did All About Our Bodies understanding and supporting early childhood sexual development and what's developmentally appropriate. It's a 2-part session. We actually ran out of time because it was loaded. At the beginning of the pandemic, we did a Tender and Tough Topics, and we talked about how children come to understand the concept of grief and death. I want you all to go check that out in your spare time. In 2022, we looked at temperament, some research updates regarding temperament. So if you only understand temperament through Stella Chess and Thomas Chess, there's been many research-based updates since then. So I want to encourage you to go to the website and check that out in your spare time. In addition, I think the next 3 are really in line with this topic. We did how do we teach friendship skills as a school readiness marker? Because a hallmark of early childhood is that children get to know each other and this notion of friendship. So when we think of autistic children and their social communication and behavioral skills sometimes becoming barriers to them developing those friendship skills, there's some strategies here that you can weave into the autism trainings. We did 2 sessions on developmentally appropriateness of behaviors that challenge, where we looked at things that kind of bother adults, but talked about it through the lens of it is necessary for children to demonstrate things that we call behaviors that challenge around them wanting us to set up boundaries and limits so they can learn. Then we did a part 2, which was a deeper dive to those behaviors that challenge. And another one that's out there in the world is the true narrative of Black fatherhood, which the fathers co-sponsored. So if you're interested in any of those, I just put a different link in the chat that will take you to my playlist with all of those first 5 sponsored YouTube trainings for your consumption in the coming weeks so that you continue to learn. The benefit of it is you could actually watch it, pause it, come back, watch 10, 15 minutes, pause it, come back. You don't have to sit and consume it all at the same time. All right. So it looks like we got 94 people here now, Leah and Catherine. Awesome. So I'm Shawn Bryant. I'm going to be your facilitator on this learning journey for those who may not know me. I see Melissa Gilchrist down in Texas and Keona Stanley over in Oakland. All right, look at that. I see my good colleagues across the country here. I just took a look at the screen. So you all are over here, the camera's here, and what you see is over here. So if you see my head moving, you know what's happening. I've been doing this work going on 35 years now. I'm from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, where I'm actually standing right now in my house. I lived outside of Georgia for a number of years, and I called California home for 24 years, but I spent about a week and a half every month in California, then the other 3.5 here in Philadelphia. I was just in California last week doing a bunch of work and seeing my godchildren. I'm a former preschool teacher, center director, a mental health specialist, and a bunch of other titles that wouldn't fit on the screen. I take this notion of culturally responsive practices and perspectives seriously, which is why I really like Vygotsky's social cultural learning. I am a Montessorian. I have an AMS credential. It shows up in everything I do. I believe in family-centered practices. I know for those of you who are trained early childhood professionals in child development, we hear child-centered, and that's important. However, you can't do anything with anybody's child without understanding the context and conditions through which they show up. So that means the family must always be first before you do anything with and for their child. And I really have a focus on fathers. First Five Alameda is doing a monthly professional learning community that started in January of last month. And I like to say, you know, if you're doing family engagement, you can't be doing family engagement if you haven't considered fathers. And still, we're considering fathers after the fact, which means we're actually not doing family engagement. You're doing mother engagement or grandmother engagement or tia and abuelita engagement. So some things that we need to rethink as we do this work. I believe in ABAR practices in terms of teaching and learning. They help me grow. that's anti-bias, anti-racist practices, and that everybody on this call is a leader. All 97 of us are leaders in our respective roles. I think our voices and our work and our personalities show up, and we've got to understand the ways to leverage those as resources. While I do believe in inclusion, it's not a checklist, it is actions that we take so that children and adults understand and feel and experience true belonging. And my favorite four-letter word is play. You know, how are we really facilitating play and sustaining it? Because all the research now, all of my friends that work in big tech companies, they're basically taking their people out at least 2 days every 3 months so that they can play. They're creating environments for adults to play because they realize, based on research, how effective it is, not for them staying at the work, but for them becoming healthier employees. So this thing that we should be offering children, how do we make sure we're not saying go play, but we're part and parcel of the play? So formally, I'm the director and principal consultant for YesToECE, which is why I'm here. But my other big role is I'm director of adult learning experience, social impact. That's really about policy and advocacy and evaluation at the child program at Yale University's Child Study Center. I'm getting there. So these are my really important people in my life. That's Skylar, Uriah, and Nicole. They're my first cousin's children, and they're all my godchildren. This is us at the Philadelphia Zoo at the light show this past winter. These are my godchildren who I saw. We were at Sushi House before I left California. That's Buhai, Madison, and Shola. Madison and Shola are in some play for Black History Month. So I definitely will be at their play on the 22nd. I think the play might be problematic. So I told their parents we might be on the news because they were explaining the play to me. And somehow I said to Shola, does your teacher know you're Black? And she said, yeah. And Madison's in the play. She said, she knows I'm Black too, Uncle. And I said, okay, because Shola in the play, she is Ole Miss. She's Mass's mother. So their godfather was like, wait a minute, I'm confused. So we'll see what happens on the 22nd, because their mother promised me the play was not problematic, but I'm going to be on the first row. And if the play is problematic, you're going to be on the news. And here are my 5 nephews that you all hear me talk about often. My brothers, my youngest brother, who's the tallest in the back, and my sister and my brother's 4 sons. That was the anniversary of my mother's passing. I encourage you all to follow me on social media if you haven't. Really, YouTube is the place, because that's where all of the stuff will get uploaded to in terms of trainings and all the stuff that we have coming if you're on social media. But the other places, I'm there also, but YouTube is the place, because we're going to be offering a lot of free trainings, and they're all going to get pushed to YouTube. We won't be using Zoom. So if you're on YouTube, you'll get notification. I'm sure most of you know that I'm contributing author to Trauma Responsive Family Engagement and author of Trauma Informed Practices. We don't make any money off the books. If you have the book, great. If you don't, email me. Let's have a conversation. I probably can get you the book, but don't tell nobody. All right. Some virtual agreements. I want us to participate. Oftentimes these trainings are transactional, and that's all right. But think about and reflect on your own experience. What do you know about autism? What will what seems to be the challenges? What biases you bring? Who are the children in your atmosphere? What's your role and responsibility? And think about new ways of knowing and doing things, and what can you take back to your work? All right, enough of that. So let's jump into why we're here. So in addition to me being the director of YesToECE and the director at the Child Program, August of 2023 until August of 2024, not a lot of people know, Catherine and Leah know, that I actually taught preschool also. I took my old 50-something year old self back into a preschool classroom, because I said, all these teachers that I'm coaching and training, they're complaining. And thanks to my cousin Shanae, who owns a cadre of preschools here in Philadelphia, and she has Philly Pre-K and I was helping her and I said, I think I want to teach. And she said, what? And I said, I think I want to teach. So I appreciate her for saying yes, while I continue to do the other work. But that year, thanks to Asir, thanks to Alani and Asher and Jordan, Ayub, Bryce, Dominic, Jonathan, Caden, Kevin, Mary Gail, Myla, Naris. We had two Novas, Nova F and Nova G, Prince, Zara, Taj, and Tariq. They are brothers. Zakari, and then came Aiden, Stephen, and Rosie. I started drinking after that. But in my class, there were 14 boys, 8 who were on the autism spectrum. 6 of them started the year in pull-ups. I had 3 that were nonverbal, 7 who were receiving speech, 4 who had daily ABA, a one-on-one person who came into the classroom with them if they were present all day, 4 receiving OT, and 4 receiving academic support, meaning their IEP, they would have the OT person come, their speech person come, their one-on-one person come, and then they would have somebody who would come and pull them out and do stuff with them for 30 minutes. So a lot of people coming in and out of my classroom. And I'm taking the time here to thank these children and their parents, because it taught me about myself and about them. They made me remember and recall my strengths as an educator, right? They made me call out some truths in ECE that we often don't discuss because we keep talking about workforce and compensation. But the real reality was, had I not been a skilled educator who came with decades of knowledge, I probably would have quit month 1. And that's the truth. Because the quick reality was nobody was coming to save me, so I had to do it. And because I had some resources and tools in my toolbox, I was able to do it. But the realities were I had to shift my frame. I had to shift my frame to be successful with this community of young learners who came with a myriad of strengths and many, many needs. I had about 5 little boys, but this wasn't their first preschool. One of them, this was his 3rd preschool. Imagine being not quite 4 yet. He started in September and he turned 4 in February. And when he started, his mother said, this is his 3rd placement. Imagine that, at that young, being told you're not welcomed here. So my role, which is the title of this training, is not really strategies. It's about becoming an interventionist. Becoming an interventionist. And this is a strategy that I want everybody to lean into. Because you may be saying, well, Shawn, why do I need to become an interventionist? Don't I just need to know some tricks and tips to work with these children on the autism spectrum or that are autistic? That might get you through the door, but it's not going to keep you there if your mindset doesn't shift. So I had to refocus and I had to remember and become an interventionist. That meant I had to say yes to all of those children. I had to say yes to them. Even the ones that I didn't want to say yes to, that I wanted to say, oh, if his mother could just keep him home today. I had to say yes. I had to become really, really curious, not from the coach's lens or as the trainer's lens, but as their teacher. I had to become really curious about what I was seeing, what they were experiencing, and what needed to shift and change. These were all parts of the strategy. I had to utilize the inquiry stance as a daily strategy that, in addition to saying yes and being curious, I couldn't come with demands. I had to come with inquiry for those 3 and 4-year-olds. And as the teacher, as the lead adult in that classroom, everything had to be adult framed, but child-centered. I'll say that again because people get confused about the two. It had to be adult framed. I didn't say adult directed, adult framed, but child-centered. And that frame was me utilizing what's happening, what are they using, what are they not using, what seems to confuse them, what do they seem to enjoy. So that framing was the structure so that they could then develop the freedom they needed to learn, grow, and thrive across a very vast continuum. And all of these were part and parcel of me becoming an interventionist, not just for myself, but for all of those children whose names I called. So one of the strategies that I want you to share that is core to me is that when we look into this mirror as teachers, as facilitators, as play space folk, we need to tell ourselves that we are enough. When we reflect and interact, our response can't be someone else needs to come do this. The response has to become, I'm enough. So what will I do differently today? Not what are the 12 things, but what's the one thing I'm going to do different today? Maybe I'm going to take some deep breaths before I speak. But we're going to get into a lot of the things that I did to support my multiple learners who were on the autism spectrum, but really supporting the whole community of learners because I used an interventionist lens. And each and every day when I walked up those steps into the building, I told myself that I was enough and that I could give them, a lot of what they needed. The other core thing that many of you have heard me talk about over probably the last 4 years is as strategy, this notion of being therapeutic, right? Traditionally, the message around children on the autism spectrum was it was deficit-based. Regardless of your role and responsibility, we can become therapeutic, meaning how do we hold space for young children? How do we hold space for them and their families? And that's that strategy is becoming therapeutic, not a therapist. So Shawn isn't saying play therapist. I'm simply saying, how do you lean towards becoming therapeutic? And those are some of the strategies that we're going to talk about today and on Thursday. So I like to start this again by sharing this quote. This quote is actually every time I do anything related to autism, I use this quote. So this is probably the only slide that's in this presentation that's also in the recorded presentation already on YouTube. So the author said, autism imposes no inherent limits on children. I'll say that again for the people in the background. Autism imposes no inherent limits on children, but we as adults often do. We pose the limits through our failure to adapt our teaching. So much of this is going to be around me experimenting with my own teaching and adapting and shifting and pivoting. Caregiving to different manner in which our children with autism process information. How are they taking my large group, my circle, my carpet time? I'm going to talk about some things I had to change immediately. The experiences in their physical environment. My walls didn't have a lot of stuff on them, and I had a very neutral color on the wall. And how did they relate to each other? I think this quote is fantastic because it really asks us to do what? It says lean in. And when you lean in, what are you going to do differently, right? What are you going to do differently? All right. So autism is a form of neurodiversity, and that's an umbrella term that captures many, many different things that we know is present in children from a very young age, So probably the next 7 slides, I'm going to go over some information. I was going to say technical, but it's not necessarily technical. I think it's helpful to know where this came from. Much of this came from the CDC's website that's actually being changed as we have this conversation. If you go to CDC Autism, you're going to see a big yellow banner up at the top. Compared to 2 months ago, that banner wasn't there. And there are things that were there 2 months ago that have been removed from their website as it pertains to autism. All right. So the CDC has this Autism and Developmental Disabilities Monitoring Network that started with 11 places across the country. It was a collaborative network that was tracking the number and the characteristics of young children with autism spectrum disorder in multiple communities across the United States. And you can see where some of those communities are. It started with 11 and it moved to 16, right? And the CDC's goal here was to encourage their partners to use the information from the ADDM in their local communities and across our country to move forward with initiatives, policies, and research that are aimed to help children and their families living with autism spectrum disorder. So the initial study, well, there are a different one that took up older children, but the one that I'm concerned with here is the number of 4-year-old children who had or have autism in those 11 different areas in the United States in the beginning, right? And the studies looked at what age children with autism were being identified and the impact of COVID-19 on their autism identification. So we actually have some clear data that children who were born in 2016 were more likely, and their data says they're about 56% more likely to receive an autism diagnosis by the age of 4 compared with children born in 2016. So we leap from 2016 to 2012 to 2016, 56%. Then we looked at among those 4-year-old children in those 11 areas in 2020, after COVID-19 started, we found that fewer children were evaluated or identified with autism. I'm going to say that again. After COVID-19 started, fewer children were evaluated for or identified with autism. Guess what? Many of those children are in our preschools now, or they just left your preschool and they're in kindergarten right now, or in California, that might be in TK. We also know that for every one girl identified with autism, we have 3 male-born children identified with autism. So for every one female, we have 3 males identified with autism. And we do accept and know that most people believe that female-born children are just underdiagnosed because they tend to be more internalized and less externalized. Some people believe it's because of androgen in male-born children's brains that kind of ushers them into being a little bit more externalized or aggressive and physical compared to female-born children. That's one theory. That's one theory, but it is not like the whole theory. We know that more Black, Hispanic, and Asian or Pacific Islander children were identified with autism than white children. And these findings were among 4-year-old children that were first observed in this network. Really, really important. So you may be saying, Shawn, why did you slow down here? And why are these findings important? Because the earlier a child can be identified with autism, the sooner the child can receive services and support. This is important. And some of those services and support are the program that they're in with you. So we've got to move away from saying, I have a childcare center, I work at a preschool. Regardless of what title you give it, all of it is early intervention. If you have young children who are coming to your place of work, this is why we become an interventionist. The shift has to be, it's all early intervention. If you work at a Head Start program, that's early intervention. If you work at a preschool program, yeah, you push academics, but it's early intervention. If you work at a state-funded program, there's early intervention. It's not just the early intervention program that's the early intervention. We're all doing the work because those children are showing up in every last one of our schools, programs, and agencies. In these programs that we offer in these services, they can help children develop the important skills in early childhood so that they can become more effective teens and adults. So we know that ASD is a developmental disability, and it's really about the brain, right? We know that some people with ASD have known differences. In other causes, we don't really know yet. Many scientists believe that there are multiple causes of ASD that kind of act together to change the way it's expressed in particular people, right? And we know that EI services generally improve the development of children with autism spectrum disorder. So let's slow down and define it. So autism spectrum disorder, or ASD, you may hear the terms interchangeable. It's a type of neurodevelopmental disorder. This means that autism is present early in life, and it is thought to be due to differences in the brain. Early in life. So I showed you all earlier a picture of my little cousins. Their mother is my first cousin. Our parents are siblings. They lived with me for 8 months. Nicole is now 3. When she was an infant, they moved in when she was born January 17th. They moved in with me March 10th. And they moved out from living with me. I think it was November 22nd, before she was 1. Now, early on, I saw some things that I just had questions about, and I brought them up. And her mother would say, she's different than my other 2 children. She's different than my other 2 children. In my head, I'm thinking she might, be on the autism spectrum. So I kept telling her, when you're well, baby, check. Did you talk to the doctor about this? Did you talk to the doctor about that? And the doctor kept dismissing it and dismissing it. And I believed it was largely because of what? Her behavior. She's quiet. You'll forget she's in the room. She'll find one toy and play with it and kind of mind her business. But I saw the other things she wasn't doing that we want children to do for her age, right? It was present early in life. And her mother forgot that she was comparing her to her other 2 children. And when she kept saying, she's different, was the red light for me as to why was she saying she was different in infancy. We know that children with autism have difficulty with social communication and typically interacting with others. Sometimes it's both, sometimes it's one more than the other, right? They also have restricted and repetitive behaviors, interests, and activities. So when we think of this word prevalence, this is the number of people in any population that have a condition relative to all the people in the population. So for example, if we said 1% of a population, that's 1 in 100, right? 1 in 100. So we already talked about the CDC. So one of the things that they updated was about 1 in 36 children have been identified with autism spectrum disorder, according to the CDC. We know that ASD is reported and it occurs in all racial, ethnic, and socioeconomic groups. That means you can be the richest and the poorest, and you could have ASD. Regardless of what racial category box you check, you could have ASD. Regardless of what your ethnicity is, you could have ASD. Let's be real clear about that. We know that it's generally 4 times more common among boys than among girls. Most females are diagnosed in adolescence or early adulthood, meaning when they get to college and the work shifts, we have more females being diagnosed in college now because it was missed in early childhood. It was missed in elementary, missed in middle school, and in high school. My godmother's daughter did not get tagged until her late 20s. They thought she was lazy. They thought, she just didn't care the whole time. She was high functioning autism, but it was missed because of her behavior, And the relevance. So we know that without appropriate support, the characteristics that are associated with autism make it harder for a child to function in the social settings, either at school and or at home. Because this is a broad spectrum, think of it as an umbrella, meaning that some children may require a lot more support. There were some children in my class, I said 4 of them had one-on-one, but out of the 15 male children, 8 of them were on the autism spectrum, right? So the amount and type of support that each child needs is also about changing and developing, their change and their development. So I'm thinking in Iris, every support that was offered, he received it. Cutest little boy. Every time someone would see him, they would say, he's so handsome. And I would take a deep breath because I would say some of his behaviors aren't handsome in my head, right? That was in my head. The beginning of that school year, most people who have been in early childhood education know that from August or September and around Christmas time, when they take that break and they come back, for the vast majority of children, we have this saying we say, after the Christmas is when the lights come on for everybody. So the children who've taken a long time is typically after Christmas, everybody's lights have come on. But Naris, it was after Christmas and his lights still weren't on. That was the deep breath I had to take every day. So I actually had taken a vacation. I went to Puerto Rico the last week of January. His birthday is January 24th. Came back from the trip and we celebrated his birthday. And I remember one day we were outside and he had pushed someone. And I said, Narice, come hold Mr. Shawn's hand and talk to me. And he came and he held my hand. This is the beginning of February. And it was the first time in the year where he held my hand and he didn't pull away. And it occurred to me, he's holding my hand because he required an external piece. It was either me or something else. He required something external to help ground him. So holding my hand was his external grounding because he couldn't do it by himself just yet. But I realized that was the first time he had held my hand and he didn't pull away. And I kind of smiled. My heart smiled first, and then I looked down at him and I said, thank you for holding Mr. Shawn's hand. And he kind of looked up at me and he just nodded his head and he grinned. And it was those moments in those experiences that said, what else will I do? What else will I do? And I share that story because it could have been so easy to say he's never going to get there. Where it took other children 3 months and 4 months and 6 months, it took him 12 months. It took him 12 months to get to those other places. But he got there. He got there for a reason, because we created an environment that welcomed him. And we were always pivoting and shifting to say, what does he need at this moment? What does he need at this moment? So as researchers, we're continually learning about ASD and its implications for children classified as having ASD. There's a growing body of research, and if you go to the CDC, you'll see all of that research. I just put a small amount here, that we still need much more research in this area, right? So today and Thursday, the how that we can effectively support them and their peers is what we're going to cover. So if we think of practices, we know that children with autism are more than capable of learning new skills. Yes, it took Narice 10 months to learn what other children learned in 5 weeks. Yes, it did. Yes, it did. Did it seem frustrating? Did it seem like he was never going to get there? At times, but he kept coming. And you know, he came to school every single day. It was like, does this kid ever get sick? I said, I need his immune system. He was a capable learner. The interactions that we had with him mattered, right? He did not need to hear me only calling his name to correct behavior. He needed to hear me calling his name because he was demonstrating the appropriate behavior. Yes, it was one of the best things that he was able to do. Once he understood that these trucks went here, that these blocks went here, he became one of the best students who could clean up. So no matter how small it was, I had to call it out because it reinforced the behavior. So we had these push trucks that are really for gross motor that lived in the block area. But when children were building, there wasn't enough space for them to build, use the magnetiles, and to push trucks. So the expectation was, after we all get up from the carpet, you can bring the trucks to the carpet and push them. And one day I caught him, he had 3 trucks in his arms, and he was standing by the shelf waiting for everyone else to leave. You know, I called it out. And I said, everybody, Narice is waiting patiently for us to leave the carpet so he can push the cars here. And he smiled. It was these moments, this is a strategy and a practice that encouraged him to say, what? I need to do this every single day. And when we miss those opportunities and only catch the others, we're reinforcing the lack of in the undesirable behavior, right? One of the things that I had to do was I had to hook myself onto what activities and topics did Narice particularly enjoy, right? And that became the lean-in. That became the lean-in. So our guiding questions and thoughts here is, how do I view children with autism? Is my response, they're not wanted here? is my response, I have an inclusive mindset, but no actions to support my inclusive mindset, right? Do I feel confident in how I support autistic children in the individualized ways they need support? Many professionals say working one-on-one, but I don't have no time to work one-on-one with them, Shawn. It only works if the focus is on them, and I can't just focus on one child. Then they would say, I'm just not trained for this. I'm just not trained for this. Do I know where to go for support if I think a child is on the autism spectrum disorder? Do I know where to go in my community? Do I know how to access an entry point other than my classroom or my program being an entry point? And how do I engage with families of autistic children? Am I going with that old narrative? These parents don't even care. Or who do they think I am? Only one of my children showed up with one-on-one support when they enrolled. The other three received the support while they were in the program, because a month into the program, I had a very short meeting with them. I opened up my laptop and we had a quick conversation. And I said, this is how you can start the process. There are lots of children. If you input it now, they're probably not going to call us until after Christmas. Every parent that I asked to do it did it immediately. Nobody pushed back. They all understood. And there were some reasons why. I didn't show up saying, your child's a problem. I showed up saying, here's what your child does well. I think your child could actually be more effective in this early learning setting with some additional support. I showed up with my observation data. I showed up with an updated ASQ. And I showed up focusing on the child's strengths, not their parenting, but the child's strengths, not their problems or their issues, but their child's strengths, and said, this can help them even more. They all immediately signed up. There wasn't any magic trick that I pulled. It wasn't any, if you don't sign this, this might not be the appropriate place for your child. We didn't have to do any of that. It was simply a conversation around, here's what we see. Here's what your child is doing well. Here's how we believe we can continue to support and help your child. Strategy. We already said that it's more common in boys than in girls, probably because they're underdiagnosed, but it's really, really common. I named 21 children for anyone that was counting. Then I added 3 more at the end. And we said out of those 21 children, 15 of them were male born and 8 of them were diagnosed on the spectrum. That was almost half of my class. It was almost half of my class. The way their behaviors presented themselves varied from child to child. I had some children whose challenges were social communication, like Aiden and Jordan, and the others were their interactions. For one child may seem to, just be entwined in difficulties when initiating and maintaining conversations. That was for Jordan. He had a hard time entering play. And we're going to talk about the strategies I use a few slides that are coming up. While a whole nother child in my classroom showed a total lack of interest in any interaction. That was Stephen in the beginning of my last year. Now, I actually just talked to Mr. Kaya last night. She called me randomly. We had a conversation. And of course, the conversation ended up being about all the children. And she kept saying, this isn't why I called you, Mr. Shawn. This isn't why I called you. But of course, we're going to talk about the children. And I checked in on everybody. And she said, Stephen is doing so well. He's leaning into the routine. He's coming to the carpet. Because when I left, Stephen was, trying to write on the walls every single day. But look what happened. Time changes when we have routines and the expectations are developmentally appropriate. autistic children may learn differently in your early learning setting, right? And this is because learning in early childhood happens primarily, and this is hard for us as adults, it happens primarily through social interaction and through paying attention to others and what they're doing. It doesn't happen primarily through sitting on my bottom while an adult talks and pours into me. I know we like those spaces, but that is actually the least amount of knowledge that children are taking in when we set them up in that traditional structure in large groups. So we know that autistic children may miss certain learning opportunities because they may not attend to what the voices and the faces of people around them when there are too many people. And because they may have difficulty building relationships with us as teachers and their peers. Pay attention to your autistic children who have different levels of arousal to other children, and they can be either under aroused, meaning they zone out, or over aroused, they're energized. Now, when Johnny came to school 2 days out of the 5-day week, so our work was just getting his mother and his grandmothers to bring him every single day. That was the work. Can you just bring Johnny every day? Because he was so inconsistent that when Johnny was there, his arousal level was so high that he would pique the other children. And when he wasn't there, you would see how their arousal level was so different because of how he could affect our classroom climate. So we had to pay attention to that and provide other resources. One of the things I got was these weighted animals. Johnny loved the weighted alligator. He was able to bring it to circle, put it on him. He would lay on it and smile the whole time. But when he did that, guess what he wasn't doing? Rolling on the other children, trying to get up and jump on them. It worked for him. But the other children who wanted one, it didn't work the same way for them. It actually worked them up, so they were no longer attending. What works for one child may not work for other children. So we quickly pulled the other ones out because they were not necessary. And everybody knew Johnny used that during circle. So we all know that while this training isn't about this, eye contact, few pointing gestures, pointing to show interest or to share your observation, these are typical indicators, not responding to where their name is called, which Nicole was doing and is still doing. And of course, to get more of that, go to the CDC's website or your local kind of Act Early or resource, depending on where you are, to help you in terms of early indicators of autism. This is a big one for us. It is important to support autistic children to develop relationships with a range of people in an early childhood center. Not just their main teacher, not just their one-on-one. Because it's not uncommon for a teacher to develop a special relationship with an autistic child. But ideally, the aim is for children to have lots of good and effective relationships, right? So that other teachers can maximize the learning opportunities. And I guarantee you that teacher is going to be gone at least 1 or 2 days out of the school year. This helps them to cope when their favorite teacher is not present. Their favorite teacher is not present. That preferred teacher or adult can share strategies for building a relationship with the child and the rest of the teaching team, right? So during nap time, Narice had a one-on-one, and Imani would come into the room during nap time, and one time her supervisor came in, the supervisor was saying, why aren't you with him? And she basically said, Mr. Shawn, he's going to be sleeping 5 minutes. Mr. Shawn sits beside him every day, and if he needs to leave, I move over there. But we have an understanding, and we did, that I sit beside Narice during nap, because if I don't sit beside Narice during nap, Narice won't go to sleep, and he's going to wake the whole room up. And you all may not know, but I take naps seriously. It is a crucial part of the day, because when my kids would nap, Mr. Kaya knew I might take a 30-minute nap too. So you can't go to lunch yet, the kayak, because I'm going to snore. I got to go to sleep because I'm an old man and I'm tired. So nap was real serious, and it helped him to wake up and function better. That was the reality of it. But if I sat by him, he would be sleeping 5 minutes. If I wasn't there during nap time and I came back 30 minutes later, he was still awake, laughing and smiling, trying to wake other people up. And his one-on-one just didn't have that strength yet to know what to do in an appropriate way. And he easily saw that he could frustrate her. He would say, I got to go to the bathroom. My pull-up's wet. And it was like one thing after the other. I want water. He did none of that with me. So what do I share with her? I started sharing with her the importance of come sit with us. You sit on the other side so that he gets used to you being by him. And while I'm still here, so that when I'm not here, he won't give you those challenges that he historically gives you when I'm not in the room. So that spending time one-on-one with them is a valuable relationship. Now, many programs and many people don't do it. But remember, I said Narice needed an external regulator. Some of you know that, depending on your age, you might know it. I call it baseball gum. It's pink, it's hard, and it's disgusting. I bought a bin of that. His motivator was the gum chewing. So when he would work with his one-on-one, the motivator was, if you do this, you can get a piece of gum. He was motivated by the gum and not the work. And I helped her and her supervisor see that when he chews the gum, because it requires so much work, he can't chew the gum and fall out. He can't chew the gum and jump on somebody. Literally, when he was chewing the gum, he would be sitting in the chair and his mouth will be doing like this because the gum is so hard. He was activating his vagus nerve. That hard chewing calmed him down. It's easy for us to miss this when we say no gum chewing. He didn't swallow it. He knew to spit it out. Nobody else ever asked for it. Nobody else ever asked for it. Even if he had it sometimes in class, the kids kind of I didn't even have to explain it to them. They kind of knew that's his. And maybe because they all may have tasted it at some point and decided it was nasty, but it was his external regulator, and it helped him to build a relationship with Imani. Because it wasn't about the gum, but it was about him calming so that they could co-regulate. And he needed the gum to help him calm so that he can then lean into her calm and that they can co-regulate. So I want to be clear about what that was about, because it's easy for people to say, oh, it's about just giving kids gum. Shawn said, give them all gum. That's not what Shawn said. I said one kid had gum. I didn't say the whole class had gum. Because some of you are going to go to your programs and say that, and then your directors are going to email me saying, you told my staff to give everybody bubble gum. That's against our policy. Tell the whole story. Tell the whole story. So our early childhood settings can be overstimulating for autistic children. I talked earlier about the colors of my walls in my classroom. I was intentional about that color, right? So as educators in early learning spaces, this could be a play group. This could be at the library, the children's library. This could be at your socialization group in Head Start or Early Head Start once a month. This might be in your early learning program. It might be in your family childcare home. Wherever you are, you can take steps to ensure that children do not become over-aroused. So oftentimes, this is about turning off that background music, right? When noise levels rise, or moving children into quiet spaces. Be mindful of the rhymes, the songs, and the social games, because they can modulate their arousal levels, but they can also bring them what? Down. So when you consider the environment, and I know some of us are in those places where the brightly colored images, we do it because we want to beautify the environment because the environment isn't that physically attractive or aesthetically pleasing, but we have to make conscious choices. And putting up all those peripherals, I've been in classrooms and programs where I've gotten to my car and I thought, I don't know what color the walls are in that classroom. And I didn't know what color the walls were because they had so many peripherals up hiding the wall. Think about that. if the children have no place to focus their eyes where there's nothing, that's stimulating. And for a child on the autism spectrum, it's easily overstimulating and distracting for them if there's no closely defined space with a clear purpose, right? So I often will, if people invite me into their environments, will say, there's a space in your room, about 1.5 feet of space. So think of where most of those 3 and 4-year-olds' eyes go. Then there's a space above that that's really where our eyes go as adults. As much as possible, that space in between, see if you can keep it blank, right? So think of the height of the 3 or 4-year-old and where their height stops, meaning their eyes look right here, 1.5 feet above where their eye gaze is, so they don't have to do this. So everything right here is easily, in their eye gaze. Everything above it, about 1.5 feet. See if you can keep that space clear of anything in your room, clear of anything. And then the space above, it's really the space stuff for us that we need to see as adults. And maybe some pictures of, their creations for their families to see. But try that out in your environment, that space in between that's oftentimes overstimulating, that catches their eye gaze. See if we can understimulate them by having a space in our environments for them to focus on that's clear and free of distractions, right? The other thing you can do, even though we're not there yet, I'm thinking about it now. I'm not sure what your comment means, Safa. Oh no, I just thought we had to. On your shelves, and many of you do this already, but this is really a Montessori teaching practice that I like to share with everybody. The more that you have your shelf organized in a way, not just everything has a home in the basket, because this should, or in a, like it has a clear place of where it needs to go, or it's a picture telling the child, this is where that should be. The other thing you want to introduce, and I often do this in the first 45 days of preschool training, the top of your shelf. So think of how we learn to read. We learn to read left to right, top to bottom. Your shelf should be designed that way. Not just random, but this is all the math stuff. But at the top left of your shelf should be the easiest math item if we're talking about a math shelf. It should be, one-to-one correspondence, or some people put their colors and shapes in the math section. So your easiest math item should be at the top left. The most difficult math item should be on the bottom right. So it should progress developmentally across the top shelf with 3 to 4 things up there, very organized, so that the children know that goes there. And as the teacher, Shawn just went to the second shelf and everything down there is too complex for him. He's still on the first shelf. You should be able to gaze at your shelf and see that, to support all children, but specifically those children on the autism spectrum, because the order is going to help them learn. All right, I see some questions here, Leah. What color was the walls suggested? Melissa, we find that neutral colors work best. And we find that colors in nature, when children can see colors that are naturally occurring in nature, think blue sky, green grass, brown tree. But think of derivatives of those browns. So my walls weren't brown, but they were very, very light beige, which comes from brown. So the more you dilute that brown, they were very, very beige. Not white, not stark white, but a light beige, right? Colors found in nature can help soothe and reduce. Kelsey said, wait a minute, what did Kelsey say? I love how you define inclusion. Could you repeat it when you have the chance? Okay. Kelsey, I often just say that inclusion is action. It's not a checklist, but inclusion is action. And if we're really being inclusive, that action creates equitable opportunities and experiences. So if we're really inclusive, we're acting on it, and it demands that we create equitable opportunities. So equity doesn't become something different. Equity is what we do, right? Thank you for that, Kelsey. Natasha says, is there a way that we can get all your other videos from previous trainings? Leah just put it in the chat, Kelsey. Oh, Kelly put it in the chat. Thank you, Kelly. Catherine said, we usually send out the video links to participants. You'll get one big email after, and they'll send everything out. So think of, when we think of the environment, even though you're going to get that on Thursday, I kind of jumped ahead, but that shelf can really be an organizing factor to help young children and to help you, meaning from across the room, anywhere, if you know what's on the shelf and it's organized and you know where I am developmentally, you can tell what I picked up is going to be too complex, or if I actually picked up something that I know how to use and to use it appropriately, right? Because if I don't know what to do, I might get frustrated and I might throw it. That's the reality. So supporting children's special interests. And this is really just in line with what we call effective pedagogical knowledge that we all should have. You know, we like to follow the child's interests, but remember I opened up with what? Adult framed and child led, right? We have to be in charge of doing some things. Some people here follow the child's lead, or, you know, it's the children's workhouse, or they take it too literal and kind of stand back and say, the children are playing, they get to do whatever they want to do. They might not be learning a lot without us. So if that's the case, we don't need to be there. We need to be able to facilitate the play and engage with the play and see what's happening and what is not happening so that we can add and take away. So one of the things that I did in the beginning of the year, that first 2 days, my first 2 days of school, when I had my children sitting on the carpet and I realized it was not working, that my stress level was going up, I went home and I printed out, I had everybody's picture already, and I put their picture in a little circle and I put their name on it. I laminated it, came home, and all the chairs that were at the tables, when we came in from outside, because another strategy that you'll hear me talk about is this strategy of we come to school, we have breakfast if it's offered, and then we go into free play, then we have circle, we may do some more free play, and then we go outside, and then we have lunch. All of that is the opposite of how our brains develop. I'll say it again. It's a traditional method that does not work, because it's the opposite of what's really happening here. So what we did, we had breakfast, and from breakfast, we went outside. And the funny part was when the children saw me, because I would get to work at like 8:30, so breakfast was between 8 and 8:30. And when they saw me come in, they almost knew like, uh-oh, he's here, we're going outside, right? Because I wasn't an opener. So it was like, oh, Mr. Shawn's here. We're going outside, Mr. Shawn. And I would say every day. And they would, finish up, clean up, and we would go outside for an hour and 15 minutes, an hour and a half. First thing in the morning, I had a bunch of children on the autism spectrum. I need them to move through time and space first before I can ask them to sit still, because the brain naturally says move first and sit still second. We do it the wrong way. We're asking young children to sit still first, and I might let you move second, which is why it's oftentimes unsuccessful. Okay? So one of the things that we did on day 2, when I went home and was like, this circle, my circle lasted maybe 2 minutes. And I said, okay, everybody, come on, let's get up. Where you want to go play? I was going to spend my time redirecting behavior. It was going to be ineffective. So I quickly leaned in and said, I'm stopping this, and we're moving to something else. The next day, when we walked in from outside, guess what happened? Because when I got to school, we actually had a lunchroom, so they didn't eat in our classroom, which I really liked. I would come in and set all the chairs up around the carpet, and I put their name tags in the chair. I purposely placed certain children beside other children. I'm being intentional about it. And I told them on the way in, when you get to the room, you're going to find a picture in your name. Sit on your picture. Most of them didn't sit on their pictures. Most of them picked it up and they started chewing on it. It was okay. But guess what they did? Because it wasn't about not chewing. It was about sitting on the chair and not falling on somebody else. So the structure was, the chair is my container, because sitting beside someone is harder for me, but I can sit on the chair and this is my space. We did that for about 3 months. And then I didn't do it one day and said, you know what? There are no chairs, let's sit on the carpet. Me and the other teacher were looking at each other, holding our breath, and we said, it worked. It worked. So originally it was the chair, a picture, their name. Then I was able to remove the pictures and their names. Well, a few of them had gotten destroyed because they got chewed up during circle. And then we were able to move the whole chair. These are all those strategies that what help organize children and organize their brain, because it says, here is the expected behavior. The chair was the visual. That picture was an additional visual. So when we think of visuals, it's just things that are on the wall. The chair was the visual that said, this is where I put my body. Strength and abilities. So autistic children have many strengths. And I've talked to you about how we had to wait to get to YesToECE's strengths. And you're going to hear more stories. Because the way autistic children perceive the world around them often means they bring a unique perspective to many situations, right? They can be less susceptible to what cognitive biases, and they may have, innovative and effective problem solving. I've seen it happen. I've seen it happen. They sometimes might have enhanced perceptual skills. This isn't about them being superhuman. That's not what I'm talking about. But their visual memory might be stronger or weaker. They might be paying attention to more detail in this area with high levels of pattern recognition. We often see, and I'm sure those of you who've been in any environment, many autistic children develop intense interests. And in those interests, they can learn a great deal, right? I've heard children, Ayub could tell you the names of every dinosaur ever named. He knew which one it was. But then if you take him out of that box, you would see his social skills and his articulation would go down. You would get a lot of no's from him. But if it was about dinosaurs, he was ready to go. He was ready to go, right? Tariq, he could tell you everything about Spider-Man, everything. You bring him out of that box, you might not get as much feedback. And then our families require support, right? All of us are probably working with parents and families that are particularly sensitive to the time they're working, or they may still be grieving at their child's diagnosis on the autism spectrum, or maybe they haven't said yes. Maybe you keep bringing it up and they keep saying no, no, no. That's fine. You're planting the seed. It's all part of the process. Everybody won't let us plant the seed. And we definitely sometimes won't see that seed begin to grow. The same seed we plant, we should not see it grow. That happens too fast. Development is too slow. And some of us trick ourselves into believing, like I tricked myself into believing that I should have saw some behaviors in YesToECE in October that just should not have been there based on what he was presenting, right? That didn't occur to me until January, and I know better. I know better. So here's what we know. When parents and teachers work together on shared goals. So one of the goals that I had for YesToECE and his mother, I watched her because he would run. She would pick him up and carry him to her truck. And one day I caught her and I said, he can walk and he's heavy. She says, I know, he's breaking my back. And I said, why isn't he on the ground? And she said, I'm afraid he's going to pull away from me and run. I said, but he's never going to develop the motor skills that he still lacks. This is why he had OT, because when he would walk down the steps, he didn't have this kind of motor. He would just plop down the steps and plop up the steps, which is why he fell a lot. So I said, I explained that to her and said, walking up and down the steps is going to help him. Hold his hand and just hold it tightly. We had that conversation one time, and I would watch her, and she was walking with him and, moving and walking and running and moving and walking without picking him up. It was almost as if she needed permission to put him down because he had been running from her often. So she was afraid when she opened the door from the school that she had to hold him. Now he's in preschool, and run to her truck to put him in the car seat because she had never given him the opportunity. But I made the connection between how I saw him walking and falling, particularly up and down steps, because he wasn't given the opportunity to walk as much as he could. So changing that experience to a positive experience was not just for him, but also for her, right? Then, of course, you've got to have regular planning meetings to hear from parents, to hear what's working, to hear what they do at home. And oftentimes they want to hear from us around what we are doing. So we're going to go through this slide and then we're going to take a break and come back and jump into myths and misconceptions. And then we're going to jump into play in ways that we can help young children interplay and be successful after a short break so that you all can use the bathroom. So as an interventionist, we need to hold in mind this notion of child rights. Young children on the autism spectrum have the right to make choices. It's not always us telling them what to do and how to do it. They need to have the opportunity to make choices. Even if the choice makes no sense to you, they should have the opportunity to make choices. They have the right to make many mistakes. Many mistakes. And part of that was me saying, they're just learning. You know what? It's going to take them a while to get together at circle. I'm thinking of Asir. Asir would never come to circle. We had this woman from the city come in one time, and she was like the what do you call that thing? Step box. Second step. She was the second step coach. So she came into the room and she was just like too busy. I'm watching her and I'm thinking, okay, you're doing too much. You don't know me or these children. And she started, and the kid she went to, it was just like, he's the wrong one. Like, he's not at circle because I made it okay. Because if I make him come to circle, he's going to scream and he's going to tantrum for the next 15 minutes. So she decides to get up and go behind the shelf. Now, mind you, my shelves are, see-through because I'm a Montessorian, so they don't have backs on them. So he's seated all the way in the literacy area. And I see him every day. He's moving his head until our eyes lock. The first 4 months, he was actually participating in circle from literacy area, but just looking at me. I'm okay with that. She goes and she tries to get him, and it escalated. It was a mistake. It was a mistake. It was her mistake. My mistake was in the beginning of the school trying to get him to come, and he bopped me in the face. We had 2 teachers in the room with me at the time, and they both were like, "Oh my God, he just punched you in the face. He just punched you in the face." And I said, "It was my fault." And they both looked at me like, "What?" I said, "It was my fault. I put my hands on him to move his body, and he wailed and he hit me." They really had a hard time internalizing that it was my fault. And then I kind of just said, "We'll talk about it later. Let's get the kids down." But they really was saying, "He hit you, Mr. Shawn. You should call his mother." Like, this isn't what we do here. We had to literally have a 2-day conversation around, while what I did, I know better. I got hit because it was my fault, not his fault. They had a hard time seeing that and understanding that as children are learning, he didn't intend to hit me. It was a mistake because I put my body on him from the back. When I was trying to pick him up, I didn't ask for his permission. I just was grabbing him to move him, and he escalated. That was 100% my fault. I know better. And they didn't think so. They didn't think so. Children have the right to say no. He was saying no to circle, and I made it okay. But one day Isaiah decided to come to circle. I was teaching position in space. What do I have? So let's see. So my coffee's gone, and then there's a paper clip. So I had an Elmo in a tiny little block. Who knew that the Elmo that actually disappeared, somebody put it in their pocket, and I never saw it again. Things happen. Everybody got to come up, and I would say, I need someone to put Elmo on top of the block. I need someone to put Elmo behind the block. I need someone to put Elmo under the block. I need someone to make Elmo go around the block. Position. So they all got up. He came from the literacy area. He had a chair. And he said, "Mr. Shawn, I want to come to circle." I knew what he wanted, though. And I said, "Come on, let's make a space." His nickname was Peanut. His real name is Isaiah. Let's make a space for Peanut. Let's make a space for Peanut. We made a space for him. And you know what he wanted? I know many teachers would have said, "Well, you're going to have to wait to get a turn. He came because he wanted to move Elmo. Why would I then decide as a full-grown adult that I'm going to make you wait? When you came to circle, I actually had the other teacher. I said, take a picture, because I wanted to send it to his mother, because every day she would say, did he come to circle? And I would say, not today. We're going to try again tomorrow. She took a picture. And next I said, Peanut, you want to come move Elmo? And he smiled and he moved Elmo. He had the right to say no. And when he said yes, I leaned in. He came to circle the following day. He came to circle the following day. But then there were days where he would say no, and he knew what to do. You don't go play in the room. He sat in the literacy area and watched through the shelf. Children have the right for us to demonstrate patience towards them. We can't always be in a hurry. I can't always be using my 52-year-old brain. I can't. They demand that I what? Show up with patience and calm. Because if I don't, the calm that they desire and need, I'm going to rob it from them if I show up anxious and in a hurry. And then on top of that, if I'm not patient, I'm going to miss a lot of the things that I should be catching as their teacher. Children have the right to change their minds. Well, you picked that one, so that's what you get. My kids didn't hear that in my room from me. What they actually heard was my other teacher saying, you just let them do whatever they want to do. No, I don't. This is their classroom. It's mine, but it's their classroom. They can get the sand on the floor, because I brought a bunch of those little sand things, dust pans, and showed them all. We had 6 of them, how to clean the sand up. And what I observed was the kids who could do it well and the kids who needed more help. So the kids who do it well, I would have them help the other kids. And the kids who needed more help, at times, I would go and give them another demonstration. Children have the right not to know. Sometimes children would tell me, I don't know, Mr. Shawn. And I would say, that's all right. Sometimes Mr. Shawn doesn't know either. Knowing that this was something I just talked about. But maybe they weren't listening. Maybe they were daydreaming. Or maybe they simply did not know. It was all okay. It was all okay. Children have the right to learn while growing and learning. So this notion that they should show up with all the skills and capacities, because I see this demonstrated in how teachers communicate with me and children. The learning and growing process happens over time. Too often in September, we want them to show up, be able to sit still, hold the pencil, write their name. And if they don't do all of these things in September, we say that they what? Developmentally aren't there. That's inaccurate. It's inaccurate. And we do this often for children on the autism spectrum. Children have the right to say no and to have no respected. I know this is hard for some of us because this isn't how we were reared, right? This isn't how we were reared. I've had to have this conversation with other adults in the room with me when children say no and I say okay, and they're looking at me like, what do you mean okay? Why do you let him say no? He needs to go pick that up right now. He was playing with that. We will get to that later. We're having a group time right here. I'm not about to do this with a 4-year-old. He said no, I can respect that. Now later, I'm gonna come and say, hey buddy, can you come talk to Mr. Shawn for a moment? Can you hold my hand? That was my thing. I always say, can you hold my hand? Let's walk over here for a moment. Now, Mr. Shawn to help you if you need him to, but you were playing with all of these blocks. They have to go back on the shelf where the blocks go. Will you want me to help you or you want to do it yourself? Most of the time they start doing it. I'm just there and I give the high five, but I respected the no in the beginning and I didn't get into it. Children have the right to time. Narice needed time. Tariq needed time. Mila needed more time than the program would give her. The time that she's gotten because she's left and she's now in kindergarten, hopefully they're giving her more time and attention that her level of autism demanded. And she had very unique health needs. She needed more time. I'm okay with that. There were some things she left the group with that she didn't get from being in our group. But what she got in our group was a sense of herself, time, and the adults around her allowed her to be. The adults around her allowed her to be. All right, Catherine and Leah, that break you want to take, can we take it now or what we want to do?
Sounds good.
All right, how long, 5 minutes?
Yeah, let's do 5 minutes so folks can stretch, rehydrate. So we'll see folks back about
Right.
11:30.
Sounds good. All right. Is it time, Catherine?
Yep. Welcome back, folks.
All right. Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back. Welcome back. Thank you all for coming back. I see some other names I'm familiar with, Catherine. I see Natasha Moore, who's in New York. I see Winona Elms, who's the city of Oakland. I see Armando, who's over there in Oakland. I saw some other people. I saw Kana, who's at Lotus Bloom. I see Kavita Malik. Hey, Kavita, how are you? All right. So I see Anna, who's over there at Unity Council. Hey, I see Janet. All right, y'all. I see Simone Utsi. All right. Let's jump into it. So myths and misconceptions. Autism has received a lot of attention in our popular culture and in the media, which has led to the spread of several myths and misconceptions. So there are some examples and beliefs about autism that are simply not supported by research. So the first one is autistic children are not interested in social interaction. Many autistic children do demonstrate differences in social interaction, but this does not mean that they don't want to be social or make friends. In fact, many individuals with autism do report that they have friends and also report feeling lonely if they do not have friends. So I'm gonna give you an example. So Rosie and Jordan, well, Rosie was playing with the Magna-Tiles at the table one day. And Rosie, she's not selectively mute. She just chose not to talk a lot. She was one of those kids who only talked when she felt it was really necessary. And she chose who she wanted to talk to. So Jordan, on the other hand, you know, he has an autism diagnosis and wraparound support. And I noticed I'm standing in the classroom one day, back against the wall doing the overview, because that learning hum is happening and my heart is about to like burst because I'm like, we got here. God has to be real. Like it was one of those moments. And Peanut kind of stood up and he said, Mr. Shawn. Yes, Peanut. What are you doing? I said, I'm just watching all my friends to make sure everybody's okay. And I saw him peeking at me through the, you know, he likes to look at me through the shelf, but he jumped his head up and said it, and he went back down. But I'm paying attention to Rosie and Jordan. So Jordan's beside her. He has Magna-Tiles, but he's not touching them. They both have them. She's building and is one-on-one and seated at the end of the table. Rosie took her Magna-Tiles and went to the carpet. He followed her, but didn't bring his. When he came to the carpet, she went back to the table. So I'm watching this, and that's when I say, And I start naming the behavior. I said, Rosie, I think Jordan wants to play. He looked at me and smiled. This is those play entry skills that we have to teach that we're going to get into. I said, I think Jordan wants to play. Jordan, do you want to build with Rosie? You want to help her? I said, Rosie, why don't you tell Jordan to give you some Magna-Tiles? You want the red ones? You want the blue ones, the yellow ones? Tell him to give you the ones, the color you want. And she says, I want the yellow Magna-Tile. He hands it to her and he smiles, because this is the level of participation that he can engage in. He can't give her the language match, but he knows his colors. So I'm helping her to notice he doesn't want to like jump on you. He's not trying to aggravate you. He wants to play with you, but he doesn't have the language. So I model for her and him. He's happy, and then she's willing to participate, and she's telling him to give her what she wants. Had I missed that, we would have went into the typical, Jordan, give Rosie some space. She doesn't want to play now. How many of us have been guilty of that? right? We see it and we immediately go to Rosie's defense and never give Jordan the skill development that he needs as an entry point for social interaction. Autistic children don't have empathy. Well, some autistic children struggle to interpret and understand others' emotions because of their difficulty in reading body language and facial expressions in those nonverbal cues, which is why it's not effective for adults to be really stoic. This does not mean that they are unable to empathize with other people's emotional experiences, particularly when they see it happening around them, right? They can develop empathy and they can demonstrate it if it's modeled and communicated directly. Another myth is that all autistic children are savants. So this large stereotype that still I hear about it out in the world is probably spread through popular movies like Rain Man, where people think, oh, this is how people on the autism spectrum are. Even though most autistic children are not savants, right? They do have unique strengths and challenges, just like every other child. And our final myth is that vaccines cause autism. You get to believe what you want to believe. I'm here to deliver the science and the research. I'm not here to challenge your values. Don't unmute, don't put it in the chat and say, Shawn, that's wrong. I'm calling out the science. So this is an extremely damaging and completely unsupported myth, right? So the original study that this came from claimed that vaccines cause autism was fundamentally flawed and was actually withdrawn from the journal in which it was published, right? We have at least 15 well-designed studies that involve more than 1.8 million children have found that there was no link between autism and vaccines. All right, we're going to finish strong with encouraging children to play, right? So encouraging children to play. How is play different? So if we really understand autism and the characteristics that children who are in the autism spectrum can display and demonstrate, it's understandable why children with autism do not always follow a typical pattern when playing. Many children with autism can become obsessed with objects in a very non-typical way. They do not socialize easily. The play tends to not be socially as active with their peers, and they may be more socially active with adults. We may see communication issues. I just talked about that with Rosie and with Jordan, right? So play became difficult for him. And then he would use his body as a form of communication. So the disinterestedness that children on the autism spectrum can show not just happens in their home and their communities, but the whole world around them, right? You might see them engage in forms of what we call experimental play, right? It's usually different for their peers, though. We see them often demonstrating what play that's repetitive. We see marked preferences in items or playing one way. We want to let this thing happen. We don't want to say stop, right? Playing one way. Michael builds with rectangle blocks and only green cars. I've seen teachers know this and then they take all the green cars away. I'm like, that's not how it works. That's not how it works. And then they wonder why Michael is like having a tantrum today. Symbolic play and pretend play are usually not demonstrated because children on the autism spectrum tend to be more literal, right? You might use some sequence cards to retell a story. The children on the autism spectrum do well with the sequence of cards to retell the story. But you could ask children to retell or reenact the story, and that child on the spectrum might stare at the ceiling as if they don't understand. It's not as literal anymore. So these are some reasons that during play, our children can become socially isolated, right? Most of their peers are building relationships in play groups and play experiences. Remember earlier I said, look at that friendship training. Friendship formation is a hallmark of preschool education. So we use that word friendship, but what we're really saying is it's the way children come to know that I'm not the only person in the world, and that I am a social being who has social what experiences, and they can hone that in preschool. So imagine Kevin is mixing colors and stirring some paint colors, and then there's some fabric and some string, and he's just making what he wants to make. But then you come as the teacher or the adult and you ask Kevin to use those materials and build something with his peer. Kevin might turn his back or even walk away. You move that experience into something beyond him at the moment, socially. He's not objecting to those materials and touching them. So it's not a sensory reject, it's a social reject. So when working with autistic children, but all children, your observation is your number one teaching strategy. So most of you who've got early childhood degrees or some training, what you've heard is scaffolding is the best teaching strategy. Yeah, it can be effective. And what the research says is most people don't scaffold well. Observation, on the other hand, when working with children on the autism spectrum, is your number one teaching strategy. We need to observe to make notes of what children prefer and what they enjoy, so that we can structure play experiences around those types of interactions. When that happens, they're more likely to show positive play interactions and more likely to show interest in what is going on, right? So Target, I don't know if they have them, but like a year ago, they had all of these, they were big, this big. So they had all of these automobile types, and there were 4 different sets, and it was 3 in each one. And they all had something that moved on them. So one was like a dump truck, the other one was like a tow truck, and one was like a helicopter. And I opened them up one time during free choice in the afternoon. And of course, all the kids wanted to play with them. And probably 3 days later, many of the pieces that moved were broken. So my, cooperating teacher was like, oh my God, you all broke all the toys. Now you can't play with them. Now I realized that I had opened them all and let them play with them and didn't do one of the things that I usually do, which was, kind of show them how to play with it. So I rebought some that had gotten broken, introduced it to them and said, let's watch and see if the same thing happens. And we introduced them and showed them how to move those parts, and they didn't break them. So here's an example of, I wasn't observing well and paying attention, and they destroyed some of the materials just because they were playing with them. Rebought them, because I think it was like 3 for $19. Talked to them about them, and none of them got broken. So these next set of, I think it's 5 slides. They're in your handouts, but these are just some questions for you to think about that I'm not going to spend a lot of time on around, and the slides that vacillate between she and he. Does she prefer a toy or an object? I give you some reflective questions to help you learn how to move forward. What activity does he seem to repeat? And some other questions to answer for yourself. What materials does she use most often? Does he engage in pretend play? Does she play with others? Who? So in your own time, when you get the slides, because the slides are large, I do it that way intentionally as the copy so that you can see it. You can go through those in your own time. So some ideas for encouraging play, right? Large groups can overwhelm children on the autism spectrum. This is why learning centers are effective, so that children have a choice to either work alone or in a small group, right? It's important to let children know ahead what is going to happen. So here are just some ways that I listed that you can encourage play. And you can add to these ideas as strategy. All right, so we're going to end the rest of our time with me going through some play-based activities. And then when we come on Thursday, we're going to look at communication, some specific activities, socializing, some specific activities, and behavior. And we're going to spend our 2 hours on Thursday with just that. But I wanted to end today with this broad topic of play for children on the autism spectrum, because that's oftentimes where I believe we kind of lower the expectation or drop the ball as adults. So this first experience as a strategy is called give and take or reciprocity. Ideally, this is going to be you or the adult and the child in the experience to give and take. This is not back and forth. So I want to be really clear. This is give and take. So pay attention to the language, right? You want to make sure that whatever item you use is in the child's line of sight. So let me sit. I'm going to go through these 8 steps. So you're going to sit facing the child. You might hold up the item. I'm just going to grab what's in front of me. It's the cell phone. So I'm going to use the child's name and the toy's name in the sentence. I would say, Leah, look, Mr. Shawn has a phone, right? Then I'm going to repeat the step number 3, until Leah looks at me. Let's say the first time she doesn't look, and the second time she doesn't look. Leah, look, Mr. Shawn has a phone. And when she looks, then I'm going to place it in Leah's hand, right? So on the screen, I was using the dial. I don't have a dial in front of me. So then you're going to identify the phone as the child's, right? This is Leah's phone. Then I'm going to gently take the phone back and say, Mr. Shawn's phone. This is why this is not back and forth, but it's give and take, which is where many children on the spectrum struggle. Then I'm going to repeat the process and pause. After a few give and take exchanges of taking the phone back, I'm going to wait and extend my hand. What you want them to do is give it back to you. You can repeat this over and over and over. It actually works well. And you'll see the children who need more time and the children who get it. And when they get it, they want to do the reciprocity. This is skill building as a skill they'll need when they're with and around other young children. And then I created this chart just around which toy should I use as a strategy on the left side, the purpose of the toy, and on the right side, just some examples of toys that you might want to use, and just keep adding toys that work and removing toys that don't seem to work. So I want you to pay attention to at the bottom, movement toys can be really, really, really effective. We had 3 sit and spins at the school that I got that all the children loved. Those crawl through tubes, we had the clear ones. We had bikes. We even experimented with skates and balance beams for them to move their bodies. And they look forward to it each and every day. And of course, I didn't have 20 of everything, because embedded in that was what? Shawn is using that now. So no, Teresa has that. Let's see what we can use until they finish. And the more we use that language and did it with them, we saw the behaviors do like this. I remember one day we were outside and Miss Alexis said, nobody's fighting today. And I said, really? So I knew this was our summer program when we were spending more time outside, that because our outside classroom now looked like the inside classroom, there was more than just that play structure. And because children were often engaged, we didn't see them jumping on each other and pulling each other. And when she noticed it, it was already 2 weeks in when she realized, there's no fight today. And I kind of giggled because I wanted to say there's no fight because they're actively engaged. They're actively engaged. Paolo, the books are at the end and in the next session. Both sessions end with a book reading that I'm trying to get to. Definitely, Paolo works for Tandem, where literacy is really important. This next one is the It's My Space. It's my space. And remember, we're focusing on play entry skills right here. So the purpose right here is play entry skills. So here you're going to make sure that the play space has a defined boundary. Most early learning settings do. Allow the child to spend time in the area of alone. You want to get their high interest item or toy, right? This is about encouraging children to tolerate the presence of other children in their play space, something that most children on the autism spectrum struggle with. Think of this as parallel play or side by side, right? So next you want to add a few toys that their peers enjoy. So let's say Leah put a toy there that she knows I love, the red fire trucks. and she knows that Natasha loves the magnet tiles, right? Then she's going to add what Natasha likes. Then she's going to ask Natasha if she wants to come and build with the magnet tiles, not play with Shawn, but play beside Shawn, right? And we want to do this slowly before we add more children and more toys or materials, because many autistic children do not tolerate large numbers of children in their play space. You want to be mindful of who you invite. She's inviting Natasha because she knows Natasha will build. She's not going to come and want to immediately play with me. And it's about me building my tolerance of being side by side as strategy. Then she can, decide on more toys to play with, make sure that we're not interrupting. If this works, then what you want to do is you want to add 3 units of play. So if I have the red fire truck, that's 1 unit of play. If Natasha has the magnet tiles, that's 1 unit of play. What we find is that across typical and atypical developing children, when we add 3 units of play, meaning if we added the blocks or some people or some animals, that would be a 3rd unit of play if we played together. What we find is 3 units of play was the magic number that helps sustain children in play, okay? Not 1 item, not 2 items, but when they're 3, their creativity went up and it sustained them in play. 3 units of play. The feel inside game. Here you can just get a box and explain that we're going to play a guessing game and that each person was going to feel inside. This would be a nice table activity for 3 or 4 children. Only put 1 item inside at a time. Try to use something that they may have had in their hand. The purpose of this for children on the autism spectrum is to encourage natural curiosity and opportunities for structured interaction with their peers, right? You can definitely explain to them that this is a game and that they don't have to stick their hand in the box if they don't want. Some of them may be afraid. If they're afraid, don't stick your hand in the box. You can watch. But we want to encourage that natural curiosity and for them to slowly get out of playing with the same 2 items over the course of 10 months. The other thing that we need to do is help them learn about expectations, right? So you want to introduce expectations. This is about helping children understand basic social expectations for playing in small groups and with others, right? Notice I didn't use the word rules. Rules are usually things that we tell children, and it's always don't do, don't do, don't do. An expectation says we are all these ways, and everything we do is a part of these expectations. So it's a really different frame. And of course, the slide is self-explanatory. Introducing a new toy. I personally love this one because it's what I did every day at Carpet Time. At Carpet Time, we started with music and movement. Then we said who was there. It usually was somebody had the job of counting the children and they would write it on the dry erase board. And then everybody would move their picture from home to school. They all did that. And then we would do some breathing, smell the flower, blow out the candle to calm themselves down. And we had this big thing that went open and closed. They loved that. And then I would introduce an item that was already on the shelf, right? Meaning I know that they haven't touched everything in the room. So I would name it. So here, these are go-togethers, so we would say hand and glove, pencil and paper, toothbrush, tooth, whatever it was. I'm showing them how to use it so that they know here's one way to use it appropriately, but you can then go and you might use it differently later. This is how I did my carpet. It would be quick. And if it was something that they all could have in their hand, I would give them the materials and let them do it. Then we would do a music and movement, and then they would go into free choice. My circle was not, my personal opinion was, I didn't do a lot of large book reading in circle. Once they went around the room, if 3 or 4 kids came to the literacy area or they were in another area, I might read a book to them there. But reading to all 21 of them at a time, I stayed away from that practice in terms of us reading. But that was my own personal piece. But introducing new toys, you're going to find this really, really helpful for children who don't know what the materials are in the items and how we need to use them. Particularly for autistic children who are often hesitant to explore new toys. So when you bring the toy, it's a way to normalize it. And then you can take it from the carpet and bring it back to the table with just that one child or two children. But this is a strategy you want to take into your classroom, not just for autistic children, but this is something you should be doing at the beginning of the year. So if you've never done this, I want to encourage you to think about it today and start it tomorrow. It's a fundamental grounding strategy. This next one is what we call putting away toys and materials. Remember, the focus here was on play entry and how to play, which is usually for children on the autism spectrum, where they kind of suspend it and just say, nope, I'm tapping out, which is why the focus is on that right now. And then we'll get into the other kind of large traits on Thursday. So this putting away toys and materials, this is about helping children to stop playing when prompted and to put away toys without them getting angry or upset. Because this is about practicing, right? We would practice at the table or at circle when we're really not playing yet. Let's just practice so they hear it when their brains are regulated and their brains haven't been playing for 50 minutes and they don't want to stop, right? This is effective when children have ample time to notice that it's almost time to stop and clean up. And again, visuals work best. Visuals work best. So we want to announce that it's almost time to clean up with toys. Some people might use a bell or a chime. In my room, a kid rang the bell, and when they heard the bell, everyone froze. You know, they love this game, The Floor is Lava. So they always like to freeze, and they would freeze in funny ways. And then the kid, I taught them to whisper, not yell, but to whisper. It's time to clean up. So start putting your things away. So we didn't use the cleanup song or play loud music, because for children on the spectrum, that actually just makes them drop what they have in their hand and start spiraling sometimes. So it was, how do we modulate down instead of the traditional modulate up, right? Which is why the whisper was so important. Try whispering with your children throughout the day and see when you do it, they're going to all stop their bodies and they're going to lean in. It's an actually very effective strategy opposed to the modulating up. You want to give individual children specific and individualized instructions. So you want to walk around the room and call out people around what they're doing instead of making large announcements over the room, right? You want to encourage them to find, is it a photo match to that toy on the shelf? Then you want to offer feedback, meaning once they put it back, I want to say, Laura, excellent, high five. You put that back on the shelf where it belongs. Tomorrow we can find it, right? Really, really important strategy of not just saying it's time to clean up, because I've been guilty of that. It never really showing them over and over and over how to actually clean up and what the expectation is. So these are just some play pieces that can be really grounding for children on the autism spectrum. But I purposely did this because I'm sure all of you were thinking, this can work for every child in my classroom. Where most of you thinking that? This isn't just for the children on the spectrum. It's going to help them tremendously, but it's for all children. So as I promised Paula, we're ending today with a book. This book is called Benny Doesn't Like to Be Hugged. And this is a book about a child on the autism spectrum. And I was happy, Paula, because I found a little, brown kid and the black kid on the book. And I get really, really excited when I see reflections of myself, because I was that kid that had all of those books, and I would get the brown Crayola marker and make everybody brown in my book. And no adult ever told me that. I just did it because something in me said, you don't see yourself in this children's book as a 5-year-old. So let's end the time today with Benny Doesn't Like to Be Hugged. We'll show back up on Thursday, same time, and we'll jump right in, and we won't do the autism review. We're going to jump right into strategies for behavior, strategies for communication, and strategies for social interactions. And then we'll end Thursday with another children's book. Thank you all.
Benny Doesn't Like to Be Hugged by Zeta Elliott, illustrated by Purple Wong. Benny likes trains that chug along the track. Benny likes to eat seedless grapes for a snack. Benny plays with quiet kids like Miko and Zach. But Benny doesn't like to be hugged. Benny likes cupcakes that aren't covered in sprinkles. Benny likes clothes that don't have any wrinkles. Benny can name the brightest star, and he knows why it twinkles. But Benny doesn't like to be hugged. Sometimes Benny cries when the room gets too loud. Sometimes he twirls away from the rest of the crowd. When I tell a joke, Benny doesn't always smile. And he can act fussy every once in a while. But Benny's my best friend, and I like him a lot. If he needs things done a certain way, I don't give it a second thought. Because true friends accept each other just the way they are. And being different is what makes us unique, like a snowflake or a star.
All right. So the author actually, at the end of the book, she talks about her two friends have sons on the spectrum disorder and why she decided to write the book. But that was the end of it. And I love that she had a little kid read the book. That was, for me, the special kind of touch at the end. So thank you all for staying. It's at the top of the hour. I hope these practical strategies were useful. They're designed for you all to be able to, for those who work in the classroom and support adults who work in the classroom, to take them right back. And like I said, we'll jump into strategies for communication, behavior, and social interactions on Thursday. In addition, if you have time, there's I think it's about an hour and 40 minutes. The first autism one we did, lots of strategies there also. That one was framed a little different, but lots and lots of strategies and a few videos of teachers actually demonstrating those strategies. So thank you all very, very much. I look forward to seeing you all on Thursday. Thank you all. And I'll see you all on Thursday. Take good care and stay safe. And all my friends and colleagues all across the country are here: Texas, New York, New Jersey. I see some Ohio, California. You got people from everywhere, Catherine. First 5 Alamedas doing big things. Take good care, everyone.
Just want to say special thanks to Shawn. We really appreciate this presentation. Lots of great strategies. I also want to thank you all for engaging conversations, comments, questions in the chat. Also support with answering some questions there. So appreciate that. Also hope that you take the time to share some feedback on today's training. And we look forward to seeing you folks on Thursday. Thank you guys and have a great day.